They threw me out like I was nothing. One suitcase. A crumpled wad of cash, barely $50. And a busted-up guitar, the only thing I cared about. That's what I had when my stepfather slammed the door in my face. 16 years old, standing on a cracked sidewalk in the dead of night, nothing but the neon flicker of a liquor store sign to keep me company. "You'll come crawling back," he had said. "And when you do, you'll regret ever thinking you were bigger than this family." I never went back. And I never regretted leaving. I was born into a family that never understood me. My mother married into a house of rules, of expectations, of do as you're told and don't ask questions. They wanted another obedient worker, another cog in the machine. But I wasn't built for that. I was built for music. From the moment I could walk, I was humming tunes no one else had heard before. By 5, I was banging on the old piano in the living room, finding melodies without knowing a single note of sheet music. By 10, I had taught myself guitar. And by 16, I was sneaking into underground clubs, playing my heart out to crowds of strangers who, for the first time in my life, actually listened. But my stepfather? He hated it. "Music is for dreamers," he sneered every time he caught me practicing. "You think you're special? You think the world cares about your stupid songs?" I tried to drown him out. To ignore the way my mother avoided looking at me whenever he started in on one of his rants. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't fight for me. She never had. The night he threw me out, it wasn't because of some fight. It wasn't because of some final straw. It was because he had never wanted me there in the first place. And maybe, just maybe, neither had she. But standing on that street, my hands shaking from cold and anger, I made myself a promise. I would make them hear me. I would make the whole world hear me. And one day, when they finally realized who I had become, they would come crawling back. And I would be the one slamming the door. The first night on my own, I slept in a bus station. The metal bench was cold against my back, my stomach empty, my mind racing with every possible worst-case scenario. No home. No money. No backup plan. Just my guitar and a dream that felt smaller with every passing hour. I had told myself I would make them hear me. That I would prove them wrong. But at that moment, reality felt a lot heavier than my words. The grind begins. The next morning, I walked into a coffee shop and asked for a job. The manager, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a sharp tongue, took one look at me, messy hair, dark circles under my eyes, hands still shaking from hunger, and sighed. "You ever worked a day in your life, kid?" she asked. "No," I admitted. "But I learned fast." She scoffed, shaking her head. "All right. You scrub toilets until I say otherwise. You screw up once, you're out." I nodded. That was how I got my first real job. Cleaning floors. Taking out trash. Wiping tables while customers barely noticed I existed. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid just enough to keep me fed. And at night? I played. I found a group of street musicians near the train station, guys who had been in the game for years. They took one look at my beat-up guitar and laughed. "Kid, that thing looks like it's been through war." "It has," I said. They let me play with them anyway. And for the first time since I had been thrown out, I felt alive. Playing in the streets was different from playing in a club. In a club, people paid to be entertained. On the street, people kept walking unless you made them stop. Unless you played something that pulled them in, made them feel something. I learned fast. The first taste of recognition. A few weeks into playing, something changed. People weren't just tossing coins into the guitar case anymore. They were stopping. Listening. Some even started asking if I had music online, a name to follow. I didn't. But that's when I realized I needed to be more than just a guy with a guitar on the street. I needed a name. A brand. So I found an old friend who worked at a tiny recording studio and asked if I could record a few songs in exchange for cleaning the place after hours. He agreed. That's how my first demo was born. It wasn't perfect, just a handful of raw, stripped-down songs recorded in a dimly lit basement. But when I uploaded them online, something unexpected happened. People listened. Not many, at first. But enough. Enough to make me think, maybe this isn't just a dream. The struggle never ends. But for every small win, there were 100 setbacks. Gigs where the bar owners refused to pay. Nights I had to sleep in the back of the coffee shop because I couldn't afford rent. Days I doubted myself so much I almost gave up. Almost. Because every time I thought about quitting, I thought about my stepfather's voice in my head. You think the world cares about your stupid songs? That voice was fuel. I played harder. Wrote better. Pushed myself past exhaustion because I had no other choice. And then, after years of grinding, it happened. A viral moment. A street performance caught on camera. A random stranger uploaded it, and overnight, my voice and my music was everywhere. Labels started calling. Venues that once ignored me were now offering me headline spots. It was surreal. It was everything I had worked for. And just like that, my name became known. I had finally made it. Or at least, I thought I had. Because with fame came something I hadn't expected. The ghosts of my past coming back to haunt me. The first time I saw my stepfather's name on my phone, I thought it was a joke. It had been 10 years since he threw me out. 10 years since I stood on that cracked sidewalk with nothing but my guitar and a grudge. And now he was calling me like nothing had happened? I let the call go to voicemail. But then came another. And another. And then, my mother. That one made me pause. I hadn't heard her voice since the night I left. She had stood behind him, silent, watching as he threw me out like garbage. She never fought for me. Never reached out. Never tried to find me when I was sleeping on park benches, starving in back alleys. And now, suddenly, I was worth calling? I didn't answer. But then the messages started coming. Son, we're so proud of you. We always knew you were special. Family should stick together. Family? Now they wanted to talk about family? I ignored them for weeks. I was too busy touring, too busy recording my first album, too busy living the life I had fought for. But then, one day, I walked into a cafe and saw a newspaper with a headline that made my stomach turn. Rising Stars Family, Left Behind or Forgotten. I picked up the paper, my hands tightening around the edges as I read the article. It was an interview. With them. My stepfather. My mother. Even my half-brothers, who I barely even knew. They sat there, in front of a reporter, painting themselves as the struggling, heartbroken family of a son who had lost his way. We supported him from the beginning, my stepfather claimed. It breaks our hearts that he's cut us out of his life. I always knew he had something special, my mother added. But fame changes people. The worst part? They made themselves look like victims. The article framed me as the rebellious son who abandoned his family in pursuit of fame, while they were the poor, loving parents who just wanted to reconnect. It was bullshit. And it didn't stop there. Soon, the internet picked up the story. Fans started asking questions. Interviewers started slipping in subtle comments about my estranged family. And then, the final blow, my stepfather went public with a demand. They wanted a cut of my success. We're not asking for much, he told a gossip show. Just recognition. Maybe a small percentage of the rights to his songs. After all, we raised him, gave him his first guitar, taught him everything he knows. We just think it's fair. Fair? Fair? I had spent years fighting for every inch of success. They had abandoned me. They had told me I would never make it. And now they wanted a piece of what I built? The confrontation. That was it. I was done ignoring them. I called them myself. The moment my stepfather answered, I didn't even let him speak. You want to meet? Fine. But we do it my way. We set a time. A place. A private location where there would be no cameras, no reporters, just us. And as I sat there, waiting for them to arrive, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not fear. Not anger. Something colder. Something like revenge. Because they thought they could manipulate me. But they had no idea who they were dealing with now. I sat at the head of the long table in the private lounge of a luxury hotel, my fingers tapping against the polished wood. Across from me sat my mother, my stepfather, and my half-brothers, people who had once been my family but were now nothing more than familiar strangers. They looked nervous. Good. The silence between us stretched, thick and heavy. I let it hang there, watching them squirm. My stepfather, always the self-important bastard, was the first to speak. "It's good to see you, son." I laughed. Actually laughed. That threw him off. "Cut the act," I said, leaning back. "You didn't come here for a family reunion. You came here for money." My mother winced, casting a glance at my stepfather. He didn't deny it. "We gave you everything," he started, trying to keep his voice calm. "A home. Food. A place to grow. You wouldn't be here without us." I clenched my jaw. "You threw me out like trash. I survived despite you, not because of you." My half-brothers shifted uncomfortably. They hadn't been around for most of my suffering, but here they were, leeches at the table, hoping to get their cut. "We made mistakes," my mother said softly. "But we're still your family. And family supports each other." "Support?" I repeated, my voice low. "Where was that support when I was homeless? When I was sleeping in subway stations and playing for scraps? Where was my family then?" No answer. I exhaled slowly, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Let's stop pretending. You're here because I have something you want. And let me guess, if I don't give it to you, you'll keep running to the press, making yourselves look like victims?" My stepfather smirked. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was blackmail. If I didn't play nice, they'd drag my name through the mud. But they had underestimated me. Checkmate. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. Tossed it onto the table. "Go ahead. Open it." My stepfather hesitated before flipping it open. As his eyes moved across the pages, the smug look on his face vanished. "What is this?" my mother whispered, glancing at the documents. "Proof," I said calmly. "Proof of every bad investment, every shady deal, every fraudulent loan you've taken out in the past decade." My stepfather's face paled. "That's right," I continued. "While you were busy selling sob stories to the press, I had my team digging into your finances. Turns out, you're not just broke, you're in deep debt. Your entire reputation is hanging by a thread." Silence. I leaned in, my voice quiet but sharp. "So here's how this is going to work. You will drop all claims against me. No more interviews, no more family sob stories. You will walk away and pretend I never existed. In return, I won't leak these documents and watch your world collapse." My stepfather clenched his fists. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled. "Try me." His face turned red, but he knew. He knew. They had come here thinking I was still that desperate kid they threw out. That I would beg, fold under pressure, give them what they wanted. They were wrong. I stood, grabbing my jacket. "This meeting is over. Enjoy the rest of your miserable lives." And just like that, I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had one. But as I stepped out into the night, the city lights glowing around me, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction. Not triumph. Just emptiness. I had spent so many years chasing this moment, waiting for the day I could make them regret everything. And now that it had finally happened. Why did it feel like I had lost something, too? The silence in my penthouse was deafening. No ringing phones. No press breathing down my neck. No more unwanted calls from my so-called family. I had ended it. Cut them off completely. And yet, the emptiness remained. I told myself I didn't care. That I had won. That they got what they deserved. But why did it feel like something inside me was still unfinished? Then, one night, a call came. Not from my stepfather. Not from my half-brothers. From her. My mother. I stared at the screen for a long time. My finger hovered over the decline button. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe exhaustion, made me answer. I didn't think you'd pick up, she said softly. I didn't think you'd call, I replied. She sighed, and for the first time in years, she sounded older. Weaker. Not the quiet, complicit woman who had stood by while I was thrown out, but someone who had lost something. You destroyed him, you know, she said. He destroyed himself, I corrected. She didn't argue. I didn't call to ask for money, she continued. I just needed to talk to you. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Why now? A long pause. Then, quietly. Because I know I lost you. I swallowed hard. You never fought for me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You let him throw me away like I was nothing. And now, suddenly, you care? I always cared, she admitted. But I was too afraid to do anything about it. She stopped herself. Took a breath. I failed you. Hearing her say it should have made me feel something. Vindicated. Relieved. But instead, it just made the hole inside me feel bigger. I can't change the past, she said finally. And I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I just needed you to know. I was proud of you. Even back then. My throat tightened. You have a funny way of showing it. I know. Silence again. Are you happy? She asked suddenly. I opened my mouth to answer. But no words came out. Was I? I had everything I ever wanted. Money. Success. The world knew my name. My music played in every country, my albums sold by the millions. But was I happy? I didn't know. I should go, she said, her voice barely audible. For a second, I almost stopped her. Almost told her to stay on the line, to try and fix whatever shattered thing was left between us. But I didn't. Goodbye, Mom, I said instead. Goodbye, son. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, feeling the weight of everything settle in. I had spent my whole life proving I didn't need them. Proving I could survive without them. But now, for the first time, I realized. Winning didn't erase the scars. The city lights stretched beneath me as I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, a cigarette burning between my fingers, untouched. The skyline was a masterpiece of buildings shimmering like stars, streets pulsing with life. It was everything I had fought for. And yet, all I could hear was silence. The call with my mother had left me raw in a way I hadn't expected. I had cut them out, humiliated them, won the war. But the scars they left behind weren't so easy to erase. I had spent years chasing something, revenge, validation, maybe even closure. And now that I had it, I wasn't sure what to do next. Letting go. I sat down at my grand piano, my fingers hovering over the keys. I hadn't written anything in weeks. For the first time in my life, music felt distant. What was I even writing for anymore? The kid on the streets, playing for strangers, had been fighting to be heard. To prove to the world that he was somebody. But now the world already knew my name. What was left? I closed my eyes and started playing. A simple melody, soft and slow. Memories flooded back, the first time I picked up a guitar, the nights I spent playing under flickering streetlights, the raw desperation in my voice as I sang my heart out to people who barely stopped to listen. I wasn't playing for fame back then. I was playing because it was the only thing that felt real. And somewhere along the way, I had lost that. I opened my eyes. And I knew what I had to do. The farewell tour. 2 weeks later, I made an announcement. One final tour. One last album. Not for the money. Not for the charts. Not to prove anything to anyone. Just for me. I stripped it all back, no massive arenas, no overproduced shows. Just me, my guitar, and a mic. I played in small venues, in places that reminded me of where I started. And for the first time in years, I felt free. My mother reached out once more. No requests. No demands. Just a short message. I'd like to come to a show. If that's okay. I didn't reply. But when I walked out on stage one night, I saw her in the crowd. She didn't try to come backstage. She didn't push for anything more. She just listened. And that was enough. The legacy I chose. When the tour ended, I disappeared from the spotlight. No farewell speeches, no dramatic exits. I had lived the life I dreamed of, burned through the fame, and come out on the other side. And I finally understood something. I had spent so much time proving to the world that I was more than the kid they threw away. But I didn't need to prove it anymore. I had already won because I had never let them take away the one thing that mattered most. The music. And no matter what, that would always be mine.